it really is down to the. I don't think it's too important the skills the person has, but in terms of the labels, the branding, the positioning, the reach, so that their flag is up and they're open for business. Sort of. That's it. But you can't be a flute player or a painter or a photographer thinking that your work is up for sale, that your photographs or your songs or your lyrics, that they have to be attached to you more than ever.
Right, so hello to the good people over the internet. Today we have with us, well, he definitely doesn't need an introduction, Vehrnon Ibrahim. Well, he's an independent music consultant and also the music business, also a music business and entrepreneurship teacher in multiple music schools. And to sum up what he doesn't do, you will need him. So I'll not talk, which I generally do. So Vehrnon sir, thank you so much for joining. It means a lot.
My pleasure. Absolutely happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. In terms of you being a musician at the very first, right? So how did you begin getting into music and being a DJ and all of that stuff?
I think I began the way everyone begins, but I think the only difference was, and I think this is the same case for most creative people, who get into things organically, which is the right way. With lack of options, you don't have much choice, and when there's not much choice, you kind of resign yourself to doing something that's going to be different. I think every young person, and myself very much included, makes the big mistake of looking at things they want to be and looking at things they want to do. Because it's very aspirational to see an actor, a singer, a DJ, or even a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or entrepreneur. It's very aspirational to see that. And it's kind of like watching a movie, like, the implication that people who watch pornography, for example, become much more violent. It's like, people who watch horror movies, that they become much more glorious. It's the suggestion, the hypothesis is absurd at its core. Just because we admire something, like I see a beautiful tree, it's beautiful, it's been there for 200 years, it's grown up majestically, and it stood the test of everything that's been thrown at it. I respect it, I love it, there's glory there, but I don't want to be the tree. You get my point? And that's the mistake we make. What we want to do is something that we usually are already doing. And because we already do it, we usually become very good at it. And when we become very good at it, at some point, it'll be monetizable. And that's when advice of people like yourself, examining the whole process, the whole system of monetizing creativity, that's when it comes in. Because contrary to what you were saying, somebody was saying that, you've got to believe in your heart and your passion. And that's great for interviews, but the business itself is smoke and mirrors. The business itself is a business illusion. And I like to tell my students that, I'm talking professional to professional. In a public forum, I may not discuss things like this because we're taking the hood, or we're opening the hood of the engine of the entertainment industry. And frankly, not everyone should see it, not everyone wants to see it, but the people in it need to know how it works. Because otherwise you want to become somebody in the industry versus wanting to do something in the industry. People who want to do something are generally sucked in, and become central to the industry. People who want to be something, I want to be a radio presenter, I want to be, a singer or a hip hop artist, that's different. That's different. So for me, it was, I'm dyslexic. So and I was diagnosed or rather labeled or positioned or branded as dyslexic when I think I was 20 or 21.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I'd already gone through a couple of years, 1 year of college, and it really wasn't too useful. I would irritate and frustrate the faculty because, it was always the same thing. He seems smart, but he doesn't apply himself.
Oh.
I use the same things that they used to tell me as cliches in my classes. Like, Like, well done, Supana, you pay attention, but you don't apply yourself, just apply yourself. You hear these things over and over again, you tend to believe it. You tend to believe, okay, I am lazy, and resign yourself to that. And you realize that the system itself, especially what I grew up in the UK, it wasn't conducive to identifying or allowing young people to focus on what they keep on doing, what they're doing naturally. And India is very different. India is much more advanced in that sense because it doesn't have a backlog of 200-300 years of tradition and culture that says this is, how old are you? You're 12. Well, you have to be doing this. If you're not, oh my God, the world will explode. Because of India, such a young and such an old country at the same time. It's a natural breeding ground for creativity. It's no surprise, that you travel the world, you go and see a doctor, lawyer, engineer, consultant, or Mukesh, or, Dio, it's always an Indian there. That's actually not surprising when you look at where people are coming from and the psychological mindset, the automatic or very natural leaning towards the entrepreneurship side of one's mindset is very much part of it. So to answer your question, which is a long time ago, I didn't have much choice. I was in college and school wasn't working out.
So you were in UK when you were thinking about taking this into.
My family moved here in 1982, so I finished my 8th, 9th, and 10th, and then started college in Bangalore, Christ College. And no comment on the quality of education. It's frustrating for me because being dyslexic, there's always more effort to do something, a lot more effort that everyone took for granted, and it was very simple for them. But what I was trying to read, what I was trying to write was usually quite simple. It's not that complicated. But without the option of, getting a first-class degree from college and then marching out into whatever industry I was educated in and getting a job, without that option, one is kind of forced to say you either swim or sink, and as I say, but in the UK, in Europe, in the US, most probably I would have sunk, but in India, no, there's enough people to say you're swimming. Interesting. There's enough people who have time and patience and are looking for something like that. Prasad Bidappa in Bangalore was a huge impact in my life. He's an entrepreneur from day one. He's just a different thinker. He works in fashion. He's a fashion guru. He's Mr. Fashion in India in terms of being a consultant in design and shape and form in terms of images, etc. So I worked for him for many years. And I think it was him who put me firmly on the track of find something you enjoy doing, do it a lot, you become good at it, and people are going to pay for it eventually. So you're happy. You're not doing much effort because you're having fun anyway, and you're earning a living from it. So that's how I got into it.
Wow. That's one of the most interesting explanations I've heard till now. Like no more questions to ask and related to this. Like in context to you were saying that in the Europe or in the US, in the UK, you would have sunk if you have chosen some more creative stuff to pursue in that context. In India, when you came to Bangalore, as I can imagine or conclude from your words, that your professors in the college were frustrated from you, probably, right? Great. So people who are watching this learn to frustrate your professors. So we'll help you. But here, what we tend to say all the time, and we try, that is, Hindi में India में opportunity नहीं है ना, यहाँ पे सिर्फ Bollywood है, ये वो है, चलो बाहर चलते हैं. What do you have to say about this one? Because you have been seeing things from a very, very large scale for a long time. So what are your message to me and the audience?
It's a personal thing, obviously. The reason why. Look, the very reason I got into the industry, because I told Prasad one day that I needed to earn money, a lot of money, and he said any particular reason, and I said, I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like survival or something like that. And he told me, it's a dumb reason to go and get a job, your reason. But money is a good reason for it. What you spend it on should not be the goal. And I thought that kind of made sense. So it's a very personal thing for individuals, but broadly speaking, I think the West very broadly is kind of set in its system of change. Change obviously is inevitable, but there's a system for change. Whereas in India, because the whole economy, because the whole culture has evolved so dramatically, when I moved here in '82, there were two cars you could choose from, the Fiat and the Ambassador. No model, two colors to choose from. You book it now and you get it maybe a year and a half later. Same thing with telephone and things like that. Whereas the West had hundreds of models of cars, everyone had a telephone, TV was normal. In India, within 10 years, India had matched the world in terms of technology where it was, and then slowly started taking over, and became a test market. So consequently, I think Indians are much more used to looking at change, dealing with it, accepting it, rejecting it, moving on. And this is in all areas, whether it's, I guess, scientific areas, but even in areas of government, in law, in medicine, healthcare, etc. There's been dramatic changes. The pace of change or the quantum of change per time period has been more than in the West. So that's why I think we're more used to it. And as I say, it's a personal thing, but I'm on a UK passport. I've lived here since '82 in India. I have no intention of going back. And people ask me and I try to simplify it, but it's the same answer to your question. I'll say things like the weather sucks and stuff like that. And it's not actually true. The weather in the UK can be very beautiful. But it's a simplified answer. It's much more of a psychological answer. You want to do something, you want to contribute to society and culture, you want to get back from it, you want to be relied upon, and you want to rely upon also. It's just more dynamic. India is much more dynamic for somebody like me, and I think a lot of people who need to be told what India has to offer, because otherwise we're still relying on that very 70s, 80s mindset of work hard, get enough money, get the fuck out and do something special, but outside India. More than ever. That's always been as I say, for some people a good idea, but I feel for a lot of people a bad idea. That's always been the case. But today more than ever, it's absolutely the case. I'm actively telling my students, you want a recommendation letter to study outside, you're going to have to really convince me to help you write the letter, because I just don't think it's something I can help you with. And again, I repeat, depending on the student. There's a virtuoso student doing violin, needs to go to conservatory in Austria to progress what they're doing, go for it. But want to learn, studying the DJing and marketing yourself as a DJ and branding yourself, to go to London. That's the best part. If you're an Indian, actually it's a genius idea, but you have to go for the right reasons. If you're going to learn tabla, spend 10 years with Carnatic music, spend a lot of time working with all the DJs in India, then go abroad with Indian music that people can dance to. That's different. That's different. But singing in English in India, writing English songs, rock songs and hip hop songs, and taking that and expecting, because it's in English, for that to be populated, in the international music charts, that's unfair and it's unrealistic and it's misguided and it's a wasted opportunity. That's the way we have a lot of needs in our country. Music is a great communicator. It's a great instigator and provocateur of ideas. And hip hop in particular is one genre that lives on that, it thrives on that. And so for an Indian artist, an Indian hip hop artist who wants to make it big in India so they can go abroad, I'm actively telling them absolutely no support from me. On the contrary, I'll guide you to do it here. It's more productive, it's more rewarding, it's the right thing to do.
And also it's a developing nation in terms of creativity. So who the hell decides to go to an already developed country to build their career? Because there's no opportunity. The economy is grown over there.
And young people today, that's the best part. It's very much a conversation with some older people. I mean, in India, that young people are much more used to the level of the quantum of change and the ferocity of the change than older people. And I think a lot of people, you ask any startup, it's not about diversity. They all need that 25, 26-year-old who's just coming out of Gen Z, just leaving there, but not so far into millennials that they're out of touch with it. So they're mature enough and experienced enough to affect something like social media and have an impact there. But they're not so old that they're out of touch with the 13, 14-year-olds in our country and where they're going to be in 5 years. And the first thing that all these startups do is employ someone and then underpay them, which is a stunning example of where we are. You know, it's the weirdest thing that the what is it, the when you, it's something called the paradox of knowledge. When you don't know something, you don't know that you don't know it, so you figure out I know a little bit and that's all there is. You know, that's what all people
and then it's sugar coated.
Yeah, well, it's like you look at social media, for example. It is an emotional thing. Being a social media, doing social media professionally, you know, monetizing it, getting sponsors and clients and stuff like that, but keeping your content going. That's like playing jazz guitar. It really, really is. You'll only know if you're right or wrong once you've done it. Look, I say jazz because jazz musicians take the biggest risks. They take the biggest risks in music, and what they do tends to be at the cutting edge of their genre. So no bebop trumpet player is going to play like Miles Davis. They're going to play like Miles Davis if he was alive today or if he was around today. So doing something like social media, you cannot look at 15 or 10, 20, 30 years of knowledge and apply it today. You've pretty much got education, common sense, a good feel for it, and maybe the last 8 weeks of data to help you make decisions. Other than that, you've got to feel your way through and try it out. And as soon as you've got a system that works, something in the algorithm will probably change in your platform and you've got to readjust. It's very, very fast. Very, very fast. My point is that older people are still looking at the quantum of change in the old days. So, okay, the algorithm is there. Okay, what was it last year? Good. So that's 4 or 5 years. And it's not the case at all. You know, so they're undervaluing people who are younger, who got more insight into these games, into these businesses, these silos. They're underpaying them, undervaluing them simply because they don't understand the knowledge. It's kind of like going to a doctor, you know, and speaking half an hour, and the doctor says, well, take this paracetamol. And then you say, well, I'm not going to pay you. If all you're going to do is give me one small pill, I've got all the talking. It's kind of like that.
That's the thing. Like in India, we have so much. Also, there's a lot of ecosystems that are developing very soon, like startup ecosystem, the entrepreneurship ecosystem. We're having workshops and this and that. But my problem to that is it's good that we're developing. It's good we're having startups here. We have much more tech giants, unicorns, funded for like billions of dollars. That's fine. But when it comes to actually a certain number of people who are starting or wanting to do something, finding resources, talking to people, getting criticized or something of that sort, because ultimately entrepreneurship, doing business, it's a lot of criticism to handle, right? Ultimately, a lot of people fail to get the right guide and mentorship for whatever it is that they're doing. For example, if someone wants to like build their online store and distribute the music, physical copies, merchandise, and this and that, and they probably don't have the knowledge. Number one is they can grasp the knowledge by going to the internet. And number two, the problem with that is being internet being a very mass load of information, they don't know where to choose from, what's the right source. So what are your thoughts on this? Can people learn from the internet if they want to, if they have a good functioning brain cells, some few brain cells functioning well, or they have to get a guide to understand their creativity and whatever it is, music, dance, business?
I think it's a combination of both, really. And it depends. You're absolutely right. I mean, in my career, which is my life, actually, I've been very lucky to have some very solid guides and also some very solid people, you know, not to learn from. I mean, I tell my students, I made a lot of really good decisions, which I could fill maybe almost an hour and a half of lecture with. But if you really want to learn, it's the mistakes. That takes a whole year and a half, you know, to go through all the mistakes, because you make many more mistakes than successes. And only harping on your successes kind of, it damages your will to keep going. You've got to focus on, you know, being objective. But to answer your question, it is all about having an objective, having a clear-cut goal. If one wants to do something, again, one doesn't wake up and say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. One doesn't do that. One, at some point in one's life, one is going to see a form which says occupation, and they're going to go, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
How, how do you spell entrepreneur is a question that most entrepreneurs have, when they fill in the form. Most real
Uh-huh.
entrepreneurs versus people who are going, shit, I want to be on Shark Tank. I could present, this idea, that
They
idea,
take
I've got
do they take
everything
the
on.
self-employed?
I, that's the thing, it, it's a lot of labeling, which is
Oh.
necessary. I mean, all those labels are necessary, but they're really there for taxation and putting
Mm,
people into
mm,
categories for
mm,
systems that require categories. But it's not
mm,
actually a doctor, lawyer, sort of situation. It's not there. I mean, look at what AI is doing, for example. I mean, it's
mm, mm,
always. I mean, that's when really one has to understand what objectivity actually is,
mm,
because AI is purely objective.
mm,
And
mm,
it's the mistakes that AI can't do, which is where art may come from, that makes art human. And commercial art, AI can easily do it.
mm.
Commercial art is art to a brief versus art, which is nothing at all. It looks similar to the onlooker, but from the originator, from the creative person, you give me a brief, I'll give you something. I may not even call it art. It's purely a transaction, but I've got an idea, whether it's music or a photograph or something.
It's much
I
more
do
human.
something.
Mm,
It's more human, it's more organic. And as I say,
mm,
100 rejects, one, oh wow, maybe this can be monetized, maybe. But that's the route it has to take. Whether it's an entrepreneur, I'm sure you agree. I would argue, even if you're a doctor, it's that need to. Why is this person ill that drags somebody to medical school? Not,
mm. What's the root
you
of the
know,
problem? Yeah.
exactly that need to understand and solve that person's problem. That should be there from a person when they're 11, 12 years old. There are such people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a logical progression. You should become a doctor, even if your grades suck, even if you're this, but that's your route. But that's what I say. I mean, yeah, one does need guides, but guides tend to be older, more experienced people.
Mm,
And as I say, it's going to be tougher and tougher to get guides because of the pace of change. It really,
mm,
really is. There's a couple of futurologists who planted this idea in my head about the pace of change and the era that we're going into. Um, uh, Creative people and entrepreneurs. I mean, entrepreneurs can consider themselves creative people who apply creativity to solving business problems. Whereas musicians consider themselves music makers who are also creative. And what's happening today is that anyone in any field has to consider themselves creative and understand as such they are essentially entrepreneurs.
ah,
Then they need to, then if they apply their skills, their passions, what they would do if money was not an option, then that becomes their super speciality.
yeah.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I
Mm,
mean, I think one of the two most damaging phrases in the English language is serial entrepreneur and inferiority complex. Because you get my point. The phrase inferiority complex has caused more inferiority complexes than ever
mm,
before, simply because people have misused the phrase.
mm,
Exactly the same thing with serial entrepreneur. It doesn't make much sense because a real entrepreneur, I mean, from the idea of problem solving, has stumbled across a solution they want to monetize. To imply that they can do that over and over again,
ah,
I mean, Miles Davis could, Bruce Dickinson could, so can Adele, but these people are rare. You get my point.
yeah,
It's not a common thing.
yeah.
It's actually not common. What's actually much more common, you have two or three huge solutions in your life and you monetize those. That doesn't make you a serial entrepreneur. That just makes you a hardworking entrepreneur. Yeah.
And what
But
are
you
your thoughts
get,
on the what are the thoughts on
sure,
the
sure.
words that are normally used, like third generation, fourth generation entrepreneurs, fifth generation entrepreneurs, 150th gen entrepreneurs?
But there you go, because on the one hand, no one wants to have labels because millennials and Gen Zs and no, we are people first, and obviously that makes perfect sense. But on the other hand, we do need some sort of branding, positioning. Who is Supernova? Oh, 5 family generations of doing this. Child, now we can make Supernova with some sort of objective conversation versus a more random thing. You get my point. More
Mm-hmm.
importantly, you know, who can I work with right now? Oh, there's this guy who's got, 4 generations, and okay, let's start with him.
So there's a trust that connects.
Yeah. How would I find you in the first place? You're one of 1,000 people. You get into a group of 10 when you have 5 generations there. Does it make you a better entrepreneur? Maybe, maybe not. It may make you more traditional. It may make you a more traditional entrepreneur, which is contradiction in terms. You have to be constantly changing, but on the one hand, on the other hand, maybe you're more used to taking risks. You're more experienced in that, and so that if you grow up watching your family take business risks and how they handle success and failure, that can be an incredible experience for you. You get my point? It really is down to the. I don't think it's so important the skills the person had, but in terms of the labels, the branding, the positioning, the reach, so that their flag is up and they're open for business, sort of. That's important.
So in terms of giving creativity a shot to make a living out of it, you just can't be a creative person. You just can't play your goddamn guitar and sing and expect money will flow. You have to be an entrepreneur as well with that, because you are a brand yourself. Also, like 50% music, 50% business. So is that a healthy diet to follow?
I mean, it's if you want to break it to a percentage or ratio split, yes. I literally do tell students, if you are, and I think one should as an entrepreneur, actually look at their day schedule and try and demarcate hours for actual work and hours for partial work and play and hours for pure relaxation. And in the hours of pure work, I would happily include, 1 hour before sleeping of going through Instagram and LinkedIn and just scrolling. I would label that as about an hour of work.
Yeah.
So you get my point. So it really is how one looks at oneself, and in terms of dividing time. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Look. What are we actually doing when we work? We're not generating money. It boils down to practice. And as a coming out of a rock band, I've got to tell you that to a certain extent, you're only really as good as the amount of hours you put in the rehearsal and the practice room.
Yeah.
And meeting up for 2 hours before the gig with a brand new band. What are you going to play? What's the key? What's the tempo? You're going to start like that. Oh fuck! And you sing the backups. The audience they're going to figure out. No one's going to say they haven't practiced much, but the audience is going to look and say, I wonder what's going on the other stage. A band that's been practicing for 8 hours a day for 2 or 3 months is going to sound different. It's exactly the same thing for an entrepreneur. You've got to oil the wheels. You've got to keep the machine moving. That's the way it works.
So you also get this type of a common question like this. That is, oh, creativity shouldn't be monetized. Oh, it's art. It shouldn't be monetized. What are your thoughts on this? Like people who say there's a lot of chunk. Like this is a very overused phrase. And once again, it goes back to the same contradiction that you're saying. Like it's an 80s, 70s thought. Tab log bolte the ki nahi, paisa kamane ke liye.
There's 2 ways of looking at it. One is to remember that people in the music industry never refer to it publicly as an industry. I mean, you put on a pair of jeans. You like to think, I have now become, a cowboy, and I am ultra cool. You just put on some material. You just put on a pair of pants. You become something. You take on something, and you want that, and that's why it's so expensive. Levi's and Wrangler, they give you that image, and they sell you a 50 rupee pant for $5,000. That's how that particular industry works. Now, I could argue that it's wrong, but I'm happy to go along with it, especially when my business relies on the same illusions. I don't need to know how jeans are made, and I do know, but I don't need to know. Most people don't need to know, and once they do know, really don't want to know how the music industry actually works. If they did, they really may not enjoy it that much. They may not find that, they've been targeted specifically and what it is that they want has been provided for them on a platter and with multiple options and flavors and colors and shapes and silhouettes, and they pick and choose, or they think they pick and choose. Again, it's an illusion. You put Ariana Grande on MTV and put a couple of other things, other videos on either side. The programmers know what they're doing. When you're positioning one new star, you position them in a way between 2 songs so they obviously shine. It's an illusion.
Mm.
You know, you put Ariana Grande between Eminem and Iron Maiden, she's not going to sound that, it's going to be a different, you get my point. Context is important, and the music industry is really about context. So those working, those working in the industry, it's very important that we understand what we're doing, and we don't get sucked into delusions by ourselves, because that's when you get all these problems: substance abuse and stupid driving mistakes and doing really dumb things. When I use the word dumb, I mean effortlessly causing problems when you didn't need any more problems. That sort of dumb. Making a political statement, talking about religion without really having a knowledge of it, things like this.
Exactly.
You know, but when you see it publicly, you see people making all sorts of mistakes without realizing that many times the industry has carved, sculptured those mistakes very carefully, so the artist is going to suffer a little bit. But 6 months later, they got 10 times the Instagram followers they had with them before. You get my point? And if their fans realize that, how much this has been baked and rolled and ready to smoke up for them, sort of thing, it really is the green for the masses. That's what audiences want that a lot of the time in their own sort of way.
You teach music business and entrepreneurship in a lot of music schools. What's the most common question you get from your students, like every day?
Every day, the most common one, and I say this with respect to them, because I would probably do the same thing. Come across Vehrnon says, do not come to me and ask me, tell me stuff like, I'm releasing my new song on YouTube day after tomorrow. How do I get views? I'll tell them, do not tell me that. Even so, about half of them will message me later on, call for an office hour, we'll have a WhatsApp video, a chat. Literally, as I'm releasing my new song, how do I get more views? Literally, they'll say that. And the answer is also, well, you're not going to do it day after tomorrow. First step is stop that date. They'll say, why? I say, because whatever you have to do can't be done in 48 hours.
Exactly.
How long did it take you to make the video and make the song? They said, oh, the song is like 8 years old and video took 3 months to launch. I said, so you've got literally years of work and thought and creativity behind something you're going to spend 48 hours of creativity on promoting. You get my point?
Yeah.
So that's a very common question, and that's exactly why I'm there to teach it. I mean, I was very lucky that my band was a heavy metal band. It was my choice. I love heavy metal. I was a DJ at the time and a sound engineer. I was doing a number of production jobs. So the heavy metal band was not a money-spinning operation for us. It wasn't a hobby. It was a serious thing we were trying to do, but we could afford to be very, very long-term and do exactly what we were planning to do, augment our own personal brand equations with our audiences as being more 3- or 4-dimensional than merely just one person in the industry. So you're a musician in a band, okay, drugs and alcohol, risk-taking, etc., heavy stuff, okay, fine. But a heavy metal band is like, oh, Satan, devil, it's a little bit different, it goes back. I mean, Iron Maiden are a classic example. If you ask Iron Maiden straight up, are you guys devil worshippers? I'll be very surprised if they out and out say, no, we are not. Steve Harris, Bruce Dickinson, they'll give you a lecture, on how dumb the question is.
Why this is this?
They won't actually address the question because that's all part of the illusion. I mean, look, it's a dumb question. If you look at the lyrics, you realize exactly what side of the fence, if there is one, Iron Maiden are on. And fans won't ask the question, but it really is about, it's a business that we're in. And what we do in the school and what I take students through. The reason I teach history is purely so we can understand that history moves in cycles, and what happened with the birth and death of rock and roll 4 years later will happen with many genres over a period of time, whether it's months or years, it will happen. Jazz has had zero impact on contemporary culture since the Second World War. I'll repeat that. Jazz has had zero impact on culture anywhere in the world since the Second World War. It had no impact whatsoever. One day in the life of MC Stan one day has had more impact on culture and values than all of jazz since the Second World War. Does that mean jazz has no value? To the music industry, it's a very solid argument, but of course it does have value. It may not be in the way of in 1959 or 1935. It's different. It's different. It has to change. Things have to change. And jazz musicians, I think, will ironically be the very first to admit that.
The last question of the podcast, that is, from your experience of teaching so many students, working in so many places, experience in the music industry in such a wide and large scale for years, 3 advices for all the creative people out there, be it musicians, dancers, painters, artists, whatever they are, which they can use practically to get ahead in the career.
3, eh? I mean, the obvious one, because which is fairly obvious, but everyone needs to focus on it. You can't be a flute player or a painter or a photographer thinking that your work is up for sale, that your photographs or your songs or your lyrics, they have to be attached to you more than ever. That's the value. That's the value of it. For 2 reasons. One, a sense of purity, of authenticity, etc. And it's easier. It's easier to be you than be somebody else. And 2, much more to do with where we are right now. If you don't do that right now, AI will replace you. 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, you'll be out of work. There's no doubt about it. So more than ever, because a copywriter could afford to give up poetry and writing lyrics and screenplays to write advertising slogans. That was possible up until this year, last year. It's no longer possible anymore. And this is sad because a lot of people are already in the cycle of doing, of bespoke creativity, commercial art, which one would argue, why do we just call it commercial? Why give ourselves a false sense of respect that we're artists when we're actually doing something to a brief, and charging, different amounts for. So definitely focus on being you and creating your story, your image, what essentially is your brand, and creating it naturally rather than being somebody else. Focus on what you do, what is special about what you do, what is unique, what is what the world hasn't experienced before, and that's actually easier than one thinks. And then tell that story consistently, simply, not because that's all people want to know about, simply because you're in the process of discovery right now, at the beginning of one's career as a professional artist. Your first job is not the art. Your first job, the art should already be there. Your first job is to be discovered, and to be discovered, whether it's LinkedIn or Insta, you've literally got a quarter of a second's time to stop the thumb on the screen. So if you can achieve that, maybe the person will say, what's this image video? Maybe they'll like it. Maybe they'll understand it. Maybe they'll feel this is my jigsaw puzzle I was looking for, and press the follow button. 1 out of 100 times that happens. But if you're just focusing on, I'm a heavy metal singer, yo, for shizzle, I'm hip hop, and no actual background for it, Musicstaan, I'm like that. If that's your brand image, you're helping Musicstaan. You're not doing much for yourself. That's the problem. You yourself aren't really moving forward in a direction that can be replicated over and over again. You can build on. But you start building on your brand story, your image right now. Whatever you get, you can hold on to and build that slowly. And 5 years later, your audience grows older with you, and your followers have become fans, and fans are the ones that monetize our careers. We don't need to consider commercial art after that. So yeah, actually, the first one is focus on brands. 2, not out of fear or out of survival, but simply because it's a good excuse today to ask oneself, to ask all ourselves, what am I doing that can't be replaced by AI? For 2 reasons. 1, I want to keep on earning a living. And 2, because if AI can do what I'm doing, then clearly it's not that special. It's not that ingenious, and it's not going to belong to me. So that, and on the other hand, it's difficult. On the other hand, it's easier to be myself, and whatever I do, if it works, it'll be easy to replicate and build a career out of that in terms of brand and in terms of actual, whether it's music or photographs, etc. I'm not suggesting one sticks to one thing either. My first passion is a word I hate passionately. I mean, when I was in radio, people, one of the first questions I would ask, more as a sort of, like throwing the ball into a rugby scrum just to see what happens. More like that, I'll say, why do you want to do radio? 9 out of 10 times the word passion was used. I have a passion for radio. I have a passion for radio. Oh, I'm passionate about radio. Sometimes I'm passionate about music. When that was the case, I said, well, bye. It doesn't make, it's a throwaway word. It's like thank you or happy birthday. It's something any of us can do, therefore it has no value. So I have succeeded in forgetting what I was talking about. So where was I?
Yeah, you were probably asking about like the AI, and then the first one is branding.
Yeah.
Second one,
AI.
So
AI. Because just simply so you don't lose your job and you focus on who you are. Just ask yourself the question: can AI do this? If it can, don't do that thing. Get AI to do it and charge people for it. But more importantly, do something yourself. Be yourself. 3 is probably be the entrepreneur that entrepreneurs would like you to be. That really is about the system of being an entrepreneur. I mean, the ideas are cheap. The creativity is actually a mental space at 4 a.m. It's the years of slogging and hard work that make the entrepreneur, not the ideas. I mean, Steve Jobs, with Steve Jobs and his concepts of how a phone or how a computer should be built and keeping the power supply inside, and there shouldn't be a fan, and the bottom of the laptop and top should be as gorgeous. Those are very simple ideas. Let's be honest about it. Many people must have had those ideas. Many people. The difference with Steve Jobs, he said, "No, you're going to do it. I give a fuck. That's it. I'll burst into tears. I'll sell the company. I don't care what I have to do, but it's going to be built like this." Thus, that's how you get the world's first $1 trillion company by
and Apple is an industry by itself now.
And it is as such because you had an entrepreneur there who just realized that the ideas are important. Of course they are, but executing the bastards, that's what entrepreneurs bank their money for. That's when they sit back on a Sunday afternoon and feel satisfied, not for the ideas. The ideas are always going to be there. They're always going to be there. I'm not saying don't be creative, but I'm saying don't think that's the hard work. The hard work is taking that idea and running with it and pushing it hard for a year, 2, 3, 4 years until you run out. Yeah. And also don't worry about money too much. That's what entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs like to use words like bootstrapping and things like that. But I think that's actually a very, everyone should look at their lives like that. Do I really need this? Is a question everyone should ask them at various times in the day, especially during purchases or spending a lot of money. How much do I need this? How much do I want this? And for a personal experience in one's life, it's a much bigger question. But for an entrepreneur working in the space of music, I think that's essential. It's a business question. I'm buying another laptop. Let me look at the numbers on this. How much am I buying it for? How much is it costing me? How much productivity will increase? Therefore, how much can I get out of it? If you're right and the numbers tell you a good story, you'll feel much better about it. And if you're wrong and you realize, then you'll have a much more objective reason to say, I'll stick with a slower laptop because it's
or I'll rent one.
Sorry?
Or I'll rent a laptop rather than buying it for
Exactly. Staying in a 5-bedroom mansion, by yourself and paying rent for it simply because of lifestyle, those things will go because I think people will realize that, it's not just a show business that's show business. It's many businesses are show business, wearing a tie to the office, not sleeping well, having a very rough home life, but getting to the office shaved and shiny and bright for what? To tell a story that people don't believe and doesn't really help your cause? You get my point. People, people are, integrity and honesty and truth have become commodities. And I think your generation, the generation Alpha, I think they're the ones who are actually going to, move into the era of intuition and rely much more on their accumulated experience to generate what they call a gut feel or an instinct or a, let's just go with this. I don't know why. And you practice that enough, you get that instinct, what Malcolm Gladwell called blink,
Blink.
But again, that's what I say. You have to do it over and over and over again. You cannot say, I can't, what do you do? I'm an artist. Can I see your paintings? I've only done 3. In that case, I'm a fucking ballet dancer. I'm a fucking Olympian. In that case, you get my point.
I get it.
A songwriter is not somebody who's got songs in their head. A songwriter
build a portfolio,
50, 60 to 150 songs, because only then, you get that intuition of, A minor, B flat, and, wait a second, I don't know why, but I think that's the right thing. But you've got to do it 100 times. What do you think a doctor does?
No.
You go to a surgeon. Do you really want to go to an 18-year-old surgeon? No, why? They may well be a 300 IQ person, but without the knowledge of doing those operations 1,000 times, maybe they haven't come across your particular, arteries, and they'll say, well, I don't know what to do here, and I'll trust my instinct, which they don't have. They're writing a check their intellect can't cash, and that's when it becomes dangerous. That's when it becomes risky. Artists shouldn't be in that position. On the one hand, on the other hand, if naturally I like photography, that was my first true passion, was what I was saying. There was one small problem. I loved it. I studied it, apertures, focal length. I can tell you why it's called a focal length. I know the element in the lens that's measured from the film plane, and that distance is the focal length, and why it's called. That's the stuff I know. The small problem was I just didn't take very good pictures. Or more importantly, I took good pictures, but they weren't pictures where I was going,
yeah, this is the greatest.
They didn't blow my mind. And other things I did, started to blow my mind of what I was doing. So I just left photography. But today on Instagram, I shoot, my wife is a social media celebrity. So, I do a lot of her shooting and stuff. And the knowledge that I've had then, it's not expert level. But I know key lighting. I know like the field of rule of thirds and that curly whirly. I know how to use that stuff.
The subject light, the key light, and this.
It's not my skill, but it's not a skill that I have. But it's some experience I have to very quickly take pictures at this stage in her career until it's justified to get in a real photographer, a proper artist, not an iPhone owner / operator. Which is what I
with that note, we come to the end of the cast. For the people who were listening till now, who were watching, thank you so much for watching till then. I'll leave every link in the description of this, sir. If you have any questions apart from how do I market my song, you can ask him by DMing. He will respond, that's for sure, right? Any questions apart from that, you can ask him. Or if you are planning to release something a year later, you can ask him, because ultimately he is a music business entrepreneurship teacher. From the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you, sir, for joining in. You've been a mentor all this long in the podcast for me as well. Right? Thank you so much for doing this, and it means a lot.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks so much. It's been a fun afternoon, fun chat. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Fantastic, sir. Thank you so much, and have a great evening ahead.
You too, man. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.